Welcome to Lesson 3.2, Self-Awareness. Who am I? Why is self-awareness important? You will understand this in more detail when you read the Rashid article, which is a required reading. But this author starts to think about self-awareness. Why do I act the way I do? So it's thinking about what are our strengths and limitations, and why is understanding those strengths and limitations allow us to be better equipped to face challenges, to solve problems, to make decisions, to recognize stress, to prevent burnout, to develop those therapeutic relationships we need to make with our patients and our team members, and to improve communication. And as you read this article, it's going to go into the importance of self-awareness. So this author's definition of self-awareness is this. It's an ongoing, intrapersonal, relational, extrapersonal, and contextual process of becoming aware of one's physical and psychological traits, emotional states, and feelings, and meaningful life patterns, actions, beliefs, and preconceived ideas. Well, my goodness, that's a mouthful. So I've broken it down to you on the next page. So ongoing makes sense. So it's something that you will be continually doing, looking at yourself and becoming aware of who you are and who you are becoming. Intrapersonal is focusing on the nurse's personal self and examining personal thoughts that influence the influences of your historical, cultural, and social understanding of yourself and family values. So it's looking inside and understanding that the way I act, the way I speak, my values are all based on historically what's happened in my life, who's been involved in my upbringing, my culture, and my social understanding. Relational means it allows oneself to analyze oneself in relation to other people and examine your own thoughts and feelings with that of others. So why is it that this person really aggravates me? Or why is this person someone that I can really work well together? So it's very relational. Extrapersonal expands beyond our personal self and focuses on what's happening in the internal and external environment. So that's kind of the contextual part. And then multidimensional is similar to what I've discussed with intrapersonal and extrapersonal. It's just that when we are self-aware, it means that we're recognizing our interpersonal feelings, but also recognizing the influence that the social, environmental, cultural, and political factors have on our self-awareness. So I want you to look at this picture here. This is myself during my work in Ghana. Do you think it's important for me to understand and to look at self-awareness here? Do you think it's important for me to understand my intrapersonal and my extrapersonal attributes related to self-awareness? Do you think it's important for me to understand the multidimensional the influences and to recognize the influence of my social standing, maybe the cultural and political factors involved in this situation? And so we're going to talk a little bit about this in our online class. So why do we need self-awareness? Well, we need self-awareness when we're thinking about the concepts of leading, managing, and following. We need self-awareness because of ethics, and we need self-awareness related to the cultural diversity that we're going to see in our practice. So let's start by looking at number 1, leading and managing. So as you recall from week 1, we discussed the importance of strength-based leadership and the importance of knowing yourself, knowing your core values and your ethics. And in strength-based leadership, it requires self-reflection, self-reflective practice, and the development of emotional intelligence. And that's why in week 1, I asked you to complete the emotional intelligence quiz, and also again this week in lesson 3.1. So the importance of emotional intelligence is obviously self-awareness. It contributes to self-awareness. It allows us to regulate, self-regulate our emotions. It allows us to understand the other, so we have other awareness, and it develops our interpersonal skills. And each of us can be a successful leader through that reflective and conscious effort to be our authentic best self. And you can only do that through self-awareness. And so the link between emotional intelligence and self-awareness is very, very important. And so I'm just, again, reiterating the really importance of understanding where you lie with respect to emotional intelligence. Research has shown that emotional intelligence is core to team success. Researchers define emotional intelligence in many different ways, but one of the great definitions is the ability to identify, assess, and control one's own emotions and the emotions of others. So that's very important. And so these researchers present 4 domains of emotional intelligence. So they are self-awareness, which we're talking about, the ability to recognize your own strengths and weaknesses, values, and goals. Self-management, to be able to control your emotions and to adapt to situations. Social awareness includes empathy and awareness of the context in which you're in. And relationship management includes the ability to work in a team and manage conflict, as well as to coach and mentor. So again, emotional intelligence is very important within a team. And emotions within a team can be very positive or very challenging for the team members. And so critical to team success is understanding the role emotions can play. Secondly was ethical issues. So part of providing mutually respectful nursing care is the establishment and maintenance of a therapeutic relationship between the patient and the nurse. So the CNA says that nurses build trustworthy relationships with persons receiving their care as the foundation of meaningful communication, recognizing that building these relationships involves a conscious effort. So again, that reflective practice. Nurses should be aware of the challenges to the integrity of the nurse-patient relationship, as well as the challenges of supporting ethically sound relationships in busy and complex healthcare environments. And so there are a number of internal and external factors that can interfere or maybe even threaten the integrity of the nurse-patient relationship. And so some external factors could be the high rates of turnover or casual nursing staff that aren't really aware of the unit. Staff shortages, consistently high workloads, unhealthy or hostile work environments, poor staff morale, etc. But it's also important to understand those internal factors as well. And internal factors might include fatigue, moral distress, or a values conflict. And so while nurses have an obligation to demonstrate respect for the diverse values of patients to whom they provide care, there may be a situation in which nurses feel they mutually respectfully or ethically sound care cannot be provided. And so it's in these circumstances that nurses must be reflective and self-aware, acknowledge the situation professionally, and work with maybe the nurse management to ensure that the patient is provided with appropriate nursing care. And so to be self-aware of yourself is to recognize that maybe there's certain situations, like maybe you are maybe you don't agree with MAID, medically assistance in dying. And for some reason, you have become self-aware that that is a very uncomfortable situation for you. And so that is a situation where you've identified this, you've become self-aware of that, and you would identify to your nurse management or nurse manager, when you start, that providing care to MAID patients is deemed a very ethical issue to me. So that's just an example. Number 3 is cultural diversity in healthcare. And so this is looking at what is culture, does culture exhibit certain characteristics, what is cultural diversity, and what do you think of when people refer to cultural competence, and then how do these concepts link to self-awareness? So what is culture? So nurse managers and leaders are concerned with culture, particularly as it relates to patient care and diversity in the workplace. Culture, with the CNA's definition, is a social determinant of health, which has historically been defined broadly as the shaped patterns of learned behaviors and values transmitted over time and that distinguish the members of one group from another. And so this view recognizes that culture helps shape us, but does not define who we are as individuals. Culture is dynamic and changing, and people come to understand culture by interacting with one another and developing relationships. So what I want to speak about with respect to culture is that viewing culture from a constructivist perspective. So the constructivist perspective moves away from a historical or essentialist perspective of culture, and the essentialist perspective holds that culture is not changeable, that people are simply a product of their culture, and that the norm culture in Canada is white and moderately affluent. Any culture outside of this supposed norm is classified as different. And so the essentialist perspective can lead groups who are considered different to be devalued, which reinforces imbalanced power relationships. By contrast, a constructivist perspective of culture recognizes that various social, political, historical, and economic forces have influenced or shaped an individual to a certain moment in time. So thus, each person's individual experience of culture varies and cannot be easily categorized. And so what this means for nurse managers, nurse leaders, and staff nurses is that they need to dedicate time to building relationships with colleagues and patients to become aware of their particular cultural beliefs, practices, values, and ways of being to avoid erroneous assumptions. And so it is important for nurse managers and leaders to engage healthcare staff in discussions about the ways in which culture is socially constructed, so as to avoid these sweeping generalizations and cultural stereotypes. And so this is again the importance of self-awareness. But you need to know yourself before you can know others by examining your own different cultural contexts. So there are multiple contexts of culture. So they can come from an historical context. So what is important to you in relation to your family history? How does this influence your values and beliefs and how you view the world and others and how others view you? So now we're looking at self-awareness and culture. What about the socio-political context? How does your economic status, your education, your gender, your sexual identification, and/or race influence how you are seen and see others? What about material or economic context? How does economic status influence access to what you need? The physical context. What are any key environmental issues that influence you and your family's well-being and health? And lastly, the linguistics or discursive context. What languages and stereotypes influence how you are seen and see others? So this is very important in understanding your self-awareness in relation to culture. So let's look a little bit about intrapersonal and interpersonal, so intrapersonal and interpersonal self-awareness and critical self-reflection. So if I were to look at my personal self-awareness, which I call intrapersonal, these are some of the questions that I would ask myself. And so very similar to what we've looked at already. So what are my own historical, sociopolitical, material, economic, physical, and linguistic contexts? How do these influence my identity, values, and beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors? And how are my contexts influencing the way I relate to others? So what about my professional self-awareness? So interpersonal. So how do I relate to others from different cultures? What stereotypes do I attach to others? And what am I assuming about them and why? Which knowledge supports and challenges my assumptions? What contexts may be influencing how others relate to me? So I'm going to bring you back to this picture again. And so in traveling to Ghana, I have understood my personal self-awareness and my professional self-awareness. I didn't recognize this the first time I went to Ghana, but I definitely recognized it in the years since my first mission. And so when we have new staff or new healthcare professionals coming on our team, we designate one whole 3 hours to cultural competence and becoming self-aware of yourself, both personally and professionally. I want to talk about this term called reflexivity. And so reflexivity is basically what we've been talking about, and it involves critical reflection. And so it's all about examining one's values, beliefs, attitudes, assumptions, and experiences of advantage and disadvantage that have shaped the way you understand the world in relation to others. And so reflexivity has a lot to do with your positionality in society. So for me, I could be called a white privileged woman. And so that is very important for me to understand when I self-reflect in how I present myself and how I interact with individuals, especially with my work in Ghana. And so again, reflexivity is again looking at intrapersonally, looking at interpersonally, and then looking at contextually. So awareness of the surroundings and what is influencing the situation. So very important. So intrapersonally, paying attention to who, how, and what you are doing, feeling, and thinking, and how your context influences this. Interpersonally, the same, awareness, or different, but again, interpersonally, awareness of and critically analyzing how you're relating to others and how they relate to you, and then the context of the situation. So just to recognize or understand that culture is fluid, dynamic, constantly evolving in relation to our context, and it's a relational process. Cultural diversity, culturally diverse contexts embrace. So we want you to be in a culturally diverse context that embraces diversity and recognizes that diversity is constantly changing with respect to the context. So diversity can assume many forms in society, so related to age, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and is not limited to just race and ethnicity. So looking at cultural diversity, we tend to relate it specifically to race and ethnicity, but it's not, it's more than that. And then again, the pre-understandings of self-awareness and biases allows for seeing the person beyond the culture. So very important. So you will be involved in, or if you have not already been involved in cultural competence training within your education here. And so this is the training that we do with my work in Ghana with new staff that are coming with us or new healthcare professionals, is we do cultural competency training. And so cultural competence, it's grounded in reflecting on yourself, so critical reflection, but also acting on that critical reflection, in which healthcare professionals draw upon to provide culturally safe, congruent, and effective care, partnering with individuals, families, and communities living with health experiences and factors in many different dimensions of care. And so it's understanding that when you develop cultural competence, it's not only a way of doing, but it's also a way of being. So one of your required readings this week is going to be understanding this model. And so I'm not going to go into detail on this model, but it's looking at the constructivist model of cultural competence. And so level 1 is being open to different realities of practice in a culturally diverse context. Level 2 is challenging one's practice in a culturally diverse context. And level 3 is combining in an integrated way the different realities of practice in a culturally diverse context. So what your values are and maybe what the values are within the context that you're in. And so this is going to be very important for you to understand when you complete your assignment for this week. You might also consider completing a cultural competence self-assessment. So I will post this self-assessment tool on eClass. And to think about, what did you learn from using this tool? You will be amazed at what you will learn through your cultural competence test. or self-assessment. So these are some of the tools that you will be using in lesson 3.3 to become more self-aware. And so the following articles and tools are to assist you in becoming more aware of who you are. So you're going to read the Rashid 2015 article, which is going to introduce you to the Johari window model. You're going to be reading the Urich article 2018, which is going to show you two types of self-awareness that you might not be aware of. And then you're also going to be watching this video of how to increase your self-awareness in one simple fix. So the Johari window is a technique that helps people understand their relationship with themselves and others. And so through reading this article, you will be able to understand what this window looks like. So there's 4 panes of the window: open self, blind self, hidden self, and unknown self. And as you read through this article, you will understand which part of the window that maybe you need to work on and which part of the window that you are doing well on. So you will need to understand this to write your assignment. The second article that I discussed was the 2 types of self-awareness. And so this refers to the Urich 2018 article, and it looks at internal self-awareness and external self-awareness, and it plots it on this 2x2 map. And it gives you 4 self-awareness archetypes. And so again, you will be reading this article and understanding where do you fall within this 4 self-awareness archetypes. And so I'm going to end off with questions that you might want to think about as you move forward. So who am I based on such influences as my race, culture, gender, age, sexual orientation, economic, political forces, ways I address challenges, values, beliefs, biases? What are my values? What is my purpose? What drives me? Are my actions consistent with what I value, my ethics? How do others see me? And is this consistent with how I wish to be seen? And so as you move through the assignment this week, you will begin to answer these questions. I will see you in lesson 3.3.